Okay, it's already past 10, so we can start the conference. The opening ceremony will be heard by the director of the National Information Processing Institute. Please welcome Dr. Jarosław Protasiewicz.
Good morning, esteemed guests, scientists, and other participants from around the world. My name is Jarosław Protasiewicz. I'm the head of the National Information Processing Institute in Warsaw, Poland. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the Night Machine Intelligence and Digital Interaction Conference. I'm delighted that this institute, which works tirelessly to prepare and implement innovation and modern IT solutions for Polish science, has had the opportunity to organize such a profile event. The MIDI Conference offers a unique chance for researchers and practitioners to work in diverse areas of artificial intelligence and human technology interaction to come together. For several years, we have endeavored to meet the needs and expectations of our conference participants. And I'm pleased to announce that this year conference proceedings will be published in an open access format in Springer's Advances in Intelligent Systems and Computing series. I'm also pleased to inform you that this year the Best Paper Award will be granted to not one but two papers. The author of each will receive 500 euros. I hope that the conference will be stimulating and informative, and that it will continue to create new opportunities for all of you. I expect you to find fruitful discussion and inspiring case studies on the key subject of the conference. Once again, welcome to the MIDI Conference and have an excellent time. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the conference is officially open and we can start. My name is Cezary Bile and I'm the head of the Laboratory of Interactive Technologies at the National Information Processing Institute in Warsaw. And during the conference, with the help of our great technical team, I will be making sure that everything goes smoothly. In order to hopefully increase your satisfaction from the conference and your sense of community, we prepared several activities along the conference, and let me briefly go through them before we start. The first thing is a virtual map. As we all come from the different parts of the world, and for the remote conference, it's really easy not to notice it. We decided to prepare a virtual map. You can find the link in the chat, and also it's in the virtual venue on our website. When you can put a pin on a map, and this way, at the end of the conference, we can see that we come from around the whole world. The second thing is background generator. As for the remote conferences, it's really easy to be anonymous, and we would like to avoid it, of course. We decided to prepare a background generator that you can use for your Zoom background. You also can find the link on the chat, and it's also on the virtual venue part of our website. And on this generator, you can put your name, country, affiliation, and your interest, and then you can import it to Zoom and use it as your background. And the last thing that I'd like to mention now is virtual mural. We would like to ask all of you to show us how you spent the conference. So if you could take a photo of your office or take a photo from your window, you can put it in our virtual mural that we'll be creating during the conference, and share with other participants how you participate in our conference. And As we all know from the experience of the last two years, participation in the remote conference, also in general in Zoom meetings and similar meetings can be tiring. That's why we, as the last year, we also decided to include meditation sessions that will be held during the breaks between paper session, and last year's this session was dubbed meditation, so this is how it's gonna be called this year. So I will be also mentioning every time after the presentation session there will be breakout room, and I will invite you to participate if you like. So coming back to scientific programs, we have 2 days with 3 paper presentation session each day. We also will have a closing keynote by Neha Kumar, who is director of a special interest group of ICM for the computer-human interaction. And tomorrow, at the end of the conference, we also have a ceremony for best paper hours, and like Dr. Protasiewicz said, we will be publishing this year proceedings in open access format. And as a scientist, we all know that it's very important because it increases the reach of your research among scientific community. Okay, so this time, I think it's a time that we can move to the first point of our first day, this digital interaction session 1, and this session will cover such topics as remote conference. Of course, very interesting topic for all of us, but also ethical considerations for research with adults, and also a password safety, which reminds me of a situation a while ago when I was using when I wanted to use a wireless network at my friend's house, and asked him for a password, and he said the password is Mickey, Minnie, Goofy, Donald, Pluto, Huey, Louie, Dewey, Dublin. So I was puzzled and asked why, and he said, you know, this is just a basic consideration for password safety. The password needs to have 8 characters in the capital. So now we can move to the first session, and as the chair for the session will be Dr. Grzegorz Pochwatko, Deputy Director of Institute of Psychology, Polish Academy of Science, and the Head of Laboratory of Virtual Reality and Psychophysiology, and I am sure that he will guide us safely according to all the safety rules through this session. Grzegorz, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly, thank you.
Okay, great, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Czarek. I would rather say the floor belongs to our speakers. Before we start, I will remind a couple of, because we have plenty of time, fortunately, so I will remind a couple of rules. First of all, we have short presentations that are pre-recorded, so they will be played by our technical team. And after that, of course, we have Q&A sessions. So I encourage everyone that participates to post your questions directly via the chat, and I will read them aloud afterwards. Or if we have time, we can also discuss a little bit more. It depends on the timing. Please avoid switching on your microphones immediately, because this may disturb the process. After the session, we have also breakout rooms that will be available for all the participants that would like to discuss with subsequent authors and have some time to discuss some problems that may be not suitable for the whole forum, because we are on the same link with all the conference. I think that some of you already have been here and know what the procedure is, and everything will be just fine. So without any other hesitations, we can start. And let me ask the first speaker today. We have Mr. Wojtek Leischner and the presentation entitled Video Projection on Transparent Materials.
Hi, I'm Wojtek Leischner from Czech Technical University in Prague, and I'm here to present video projection on transparent materials. So why do we even need this? It's not possible to project on the clear glass, as it lets most of the light from video projector simply pass through. We need to find a way to reflect the light from the video projector back to the viewer. And there are multiple solutions to this problem that already exists. So firstly, we can use sandblasting. We can sandblast the glass surface to make it opaque, and then we can video project onto it. But the problem is that we completely lose the transparency of the glass. And there also might be problems if you have organically shaped glass, then it becomes difficult to uniformly sandblast it, which would, result in regions with different brightness. So we don't want to avoid this. Or you could use a projection film, which is basically a compromise between keeping transparency and reflection and reflecting the image back to the viewer. And that's achieved mostly with the use of reflective nanoparticles diffused in the film. But it's again difficult or impossible to apply or organically shaped surfaces. Also, it's only available in given sizes, and it can get expensive for large-scale solutions. You might also use active transparent LED display. Again, difficult for organically shaped surfaces, and there's also difficult maintenance and high cost. PDLC active films, that's something similar to LED, but it works in the whole volume only, so you can do no selective dimming. So you either have to decide if you see through or if you project the image onto it. So we propose a UV projection system. And basically the system consists of UV dye mixed with the epoxy varnish, and that will create a clear coating lacquer that we can spray paint onto the glass or other transparent materials such as plexiglass or else. And we combine this with the UV light source. We have used 365 nanometers. And if you excite with this special light source the surface with our coating, then it will emit the visible blue light that the viewer can actually see. And there are multiple advantages to our system. So firstly, it enables for organically shaped glass components, which is basically like you have the curvature in multiple axes at the same time. It also has nearly invisible light source, especially if you have some decent ambient lighting, then the viewer can't really see the UV part of the spectrum, but rather only the visible light. We can also do real-time animation, as the UV fluorescence has only like about 3 milliseconds extinguishing rate. You can use it for large-scale applications, as there are no size limits, and it also can be easily applied with spray painting, which is handy. And the main advantage is that it's, let's say, optically clear, meaning that you can see through the surface coated with our varnish. Let's answer some safety concerns here first. So first of all, we are using UVA light part of the spectrum, which is not that dangerous to humans, but still it can cause skin aging, for example. and you don't want to look into it for prolonged periods of time. So we suggest avoiding direct contact of the light source and the viewer. That can be achieved by placing, for example, the light source on the ceiling and lighting the surface from the angle. That's the first thing. Another thing that you can do is to use UV protection lacquer that's also clear, that can be applied from behind of the surface. So on the first layer, on the front face, you would have a UV coating, and on the other surface you would have UV protection film that would basically guarantee that no UV light will pass through the glass to the viewer eyes. Another thing you should do is to use light clamps to ensure that you are only shining to the surface you want and you are not creating light spills. And that being said, you might encounter UV lights when you go for the disco party, when none of these protective measures are taken. So it's not that would be something crazy dangerous what we are doing. Let's talk about some light measurements. On the left, you can see the characteristics of our UV light source. As you can see, it's mostly just a UV part of the spectrum. And on the right, you can see what light is reflected from the surface, in our case glass, coated with our UV varnish. So as you can see, the reflected light, it's mostly in the blue part of the light spectrum. Let's talk about the use cases here. So our first use case was to have a chandelier made of organically shaped glass that you can see on the left. You could also use this projection system for augmented reality, for example in car HUD, or as in the middle image on the glass cylinder, where the viewer can read the augmented information on the glass and still look through the glass to the outside. The UV light source, there are various options that you can choose from. You could have a video projector. Here we would prefer a DLP video projector over LCD, as the LCD can suffer from the long time UV exposure. You could also use a moving head light source and just replace the LED with UV LED. And if you combine it with the gobble wheels, which are basically like a circular stencils made from metal or glass that can be inserted into the light, you can create some analog animation like water surface, for example. You could also use a UV laser, or as we have done, overhead projector, and we have chosen overhead projector because it's simply to modify to include the UV light source, and you can still get some animations out of it. And let's talk about where we are going next. So we want to also test the photochromic pigment, that the image you can see on the right, where the pigment is basically white, but if you excite it with the UV light, that it physically changes the color. So the advantage here would be that if you have high levels of ambient lighting, it might be difficult or impossible to see your video projection because your light source is not powerful enough. But everybody can perceive the color change, so that is useful, but at the same time you would lose the transparency, as the pigment will never be transparent. And we also want to look into creating a custom UV light source, namely the video projector, as I was said before. I thank you for your attention, and if you would have any questions, I would be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we see any questions from the audience? Okay, I don't see any on the chat, but I have one question, which might sound strange to you, but I'm a psychologist, so don't be surprised that much. Generally speaking, I'm fascinated with technology, and thank you for this presentation because it was really very interesting. But during your talk, I had this apocalyptic vision of Blade Runner, in which we have these poorer quarters that are enlightened with animations on the windows of the apartments and so on. So my 2 or 3 questions that are very small: is it safe, and is it visible from all the sides that you project? So you have some part of it that is reflected and some part that passes through probably, and you see all of this. This could actually, from psychological side, this could create very high cognitive load if you are surrounded with such a stuff, or you can avoid it if you, for example, live in a place that, okay, is cheaper because you allowed for the advertisements that are projected on your windows. So are there any ways of let's say keeping us safe from your invention?
Okay, thank you for the question. So well, I can see like where you are coming from, but I have to say, like, this was not my concern when I was researching it. And as you said, like, the advertising in the window, that might be one of the use cases that this will be used. I don't know. So yeah, it's quite possible that this, as you said, like, apocalyptic future vision will happen, but I don't see that apocalyptic as you suggested. And to answer the other part of the question, a light is visible from every angle because the UV light fluorescence, like the basics of it, it means like it's lighting in 360 degrees direction. So everywhere, basically, from the surface, it's emanating from the surface. The only problem is that you want to avoid like prolonged exposure from the UV light. So that is why I'm suggesting only like using it as a rear projection. So the viewers are supposed to see it only from, let's say, like one half, like from one surface and not from the other side, simply because you want to avoid the exposure to the UV light. But other than that, it's quite possible. And if you want to avoid it, I say, like, vote for politicians that will ban this. Other than that, I would suggest, like, having some virtual reality. And as we have AdBlock nowadays for a web browser, I expect we will have AdBlock in virtual reality that will, block it, and you will no longer probably will.
I was rather thinking of some kind of surface that you can spray on the other side to block it totally. But okay, this is also the solution. I have one more question from the audience. How this technology works in various lighting conditions?
Yeah, okay. So I should mention, like, this is like work in progress. So we are currently working on it. And right now, there is a concern that the fluorescent might not be strong enough for like higher ambient lighting. I would say right now it's similar to video projection. So if you have a video projection, you usually need, let's say, a dimmed ambient light around to actually properly see the video projection. And here it will be similar case. I don't think we will achieve the visibility in a daylight, for example. For that, the photochromic pigment would be much better solution. And that is something we are working on as well right now. The only problem is with the UV, the advantage is like you can see through, so you can selectively have like completely transparent surfaces. But with the photochromic pigment, you have only, the surface is only like transparent in a sense that light can come through, but you cannot see what's on the other side. It's basically blurred too much to be usable. So for daylight conditions, I would use photochromic pigment. If you can, like have a control over the lighting conditions, then maybe the UV varnish is a way to go.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions from the audience, so thank you very much again for the wonderful presentation, and let's move on with the second one. We have Christina Lapin and Manfredas Siurkus. Sorry if I pronounce your names in the wrong way. Balancing usability and security of graphical passwords, please.
Hello, I am Christina Lapin. I am Associate Professor at the Faculty of Mathematics and Informatics of Vilnius University, and my co-author is Manfredas Siurkus, a student at the same university. Thank you for the possibility to present our first results of the recently started study on balancing usability and security. It is important in the beginning to separate two important concerns. The first concern is the theoretical security. That means the level of secure communication and computation that is technically feasible. The second concern is effective security. That means the level of security that can practically be achieved in everyday settings. And aim of our studies of balancing security and usability is to increase the level of this effective security. And why it is a problem? Because a good password needs to be easy rememberable and hard to guess. In order to be unguessable, the password has to follow strong password creation conventions. A secure password has to be long enough. Has to include capital and small letters, numbers, and symbols. And all of this require a significant mental effort to remember it. And that's why people want to simplify their life and choose to use the whole words as a passwords. And then these words are easy guessable and vulnerable to the dictionary attacks. That's why the theoretical high security is reduced and effective security is not proper for the system. So the good alternative for alphanumerical passwords are graphical passwords that exploit the natural human's ability to either recognize, memorize, and remember visual information. So all graphical authentication schemes facilitate the memorability in various ways. So let's talk about them. Qt recall-based scheme is only partially graphical because it facilitates creation of strong textual password. User watches on the randomly generated image, associates it with word, takes some letter from this word, and from these letters composes the stronger password. So here, from usability point of view, this scheme facilitates rememberability of the password using these images. But from security point of view, of course, there are some improvements because this scheme is resilient to the brute force and dictionary attack, but this scheme still can be cracked because user enters the textual password through a keyboard. So the improvement of this scheme is proposed in Recallbased schemes, and canonical example of it is draw a secret scheme, where user draws a secret stroke on the grid, like here, one or several strokes. This password is easier to remember comparing to strong textual password, but from security point of view, it also have a weak points. First of all of them is that users are inclined to draw simple pictures, like letter L or letter C. Another point is that because all these strokes can be guessable when they are simple, as I already told, and Also, you can observe what people are drawing on the screen. So the shoulder surfing, smudge, thermal, and video-based attacks are possible in this scheme. So the last pure graphical scheme is recognition-based scheme. And canonical example of this scheme are two systems, pass faces and deja vu. In pass faces, user memorize the faces which they select during the registration, and in deja vu, user memorizes the randomly generated images during the registration, and then during the authentication, they have to remember what they have selected. From usability point of view, okay, it's the rememberability is facilitated. But from security point of view, also this scheme is better than previous schemes because this scheme is vulnerable only to the attack of shoulder surfing and in some cases guessing. Because if we know person's preferences to faces, in terms of gender, in terms of race, in terms of attractiveness, then we can guess which face this person likes. But nevertheless, we can see that from the pure graphical possibilities, this recognition-based scheme is less vulnerable to attacks. So therefore, we decided to improve this recognition-based scheme and improve in terms of minimizing the shoulder surfing and guessing. Our usability assumptions are that when we will use the gallery of photos instead of faces or images, it will be more pleasurable for users. And then we have simplified the selection of images because we allow to have two identical images. Why do we think that it is safe? Because first, after each tapping, images are rearranged, and second assumption that shoulder surfing will be more difficult because during the tapping the image is covered by the finger. And third assumption is that photos solve the problem with guessing of faces in pass faces. So here are the 5 assumptions that in our opinion should improve this known recognition-based scheme. Then registration procedure starts with the entering login name by the user, and then second step is selection of the images. User have to select at least 3 images. Among them, 2 images can be the same, and also systems fixes the order of selections. In registration, the selected images should be confirmed. A second time, you have to select images in the same order. And during the login, procedure is similar. You have to enter the login name and select the images, secret images that forms your password. We have conducted usability testing with 5 participants aged from 20 to 58 years, and we have conducted 2 sessions of usability evaluation. In initial session, we have shown the prototype with 30 images on the screen, and testers were distracted and confused with this prototype because they didn't see the right photos on the initial screen. They had to scroll. So after the redesign in the second session, we have left no more than 20 photos on the screen, and then we have reduced or enlarged the images to adapt to screen resolutions. And our findings are that users were able to select the images and then immediately log in to the system. And then we have repeated the same session after a week, and the result was acceptable good because users were able to remember the images that they were selected before the week. The conclusion, we can state that the least security issues have a recognition-based authentication scheme that we decided to improve, and the first evaluation shows that our proposed scheme is acceptably usable. Testing participants were able to remember the selected photos after a period of 1 week, and further evaluations are needed to conduct a quantitative research with large number of users to evaluate the effective security and the security attributes of this approach. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Again, I don't see any on the chat, but I have one question. Again, as a psychologist, I would like to ask you about your thoughts on the nature of human memory, because, well, we know that long-term memory has this, let's say, reconstructive nature. And I wonder whether you ask your participants about their strategy to remember those pictures, because I assume that they might use some kind of strategies of, I don't know, associating those pictures with some words, with letters or whatever. And what would happen after 6 months or a year of not using the system and getting back to it? Because 1 week, in my opinion, is not very a long time.
Yes, thank you for your questions. I believe that you hear me.
Yes, I can hear perfectly.
Thank you. Okay, so it is very interesting point, and we will, in our further research, we are certainly will deepening this question. No, we haven't asked our users about their remembering strategy. Only we have tried this our offered method to in order to check them whether our improvement is really improvement, but it is I already pointed out that it is only start of our research, and it is quite new topic in our in this direction. So probably, as you are asking for 6 months, probably, of course, people will forget it. When we designed this method, we have thought about the applications that are quite often to use, because this usability problem is, it irritates when you have to often enter something that is long, that is not comfortable to enter. And okay, this 1 week period is of course not very yes, it's not a long, but no, but it is also not immediate response. So yes, so this it needed further research.
Thank you. We have another question from Wojtek. It's currently I'm using password manager for passwords that essentially make it easy to have long passwords. Did you consider that?
So okay, so here this password manager is okay, but from security point of view, if you are somebody cracks it, so it is a catastrophe for the user, because all your accounts are now open for the attacker. So here, that's why there is one point to how to save this password manager and this technology, but we are going in a bit another direction, how to make this memorability better and not to require users to use this password, because it's some kind of workout of this problem. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. We have one more and we still have time. Instead of entering long passwords every time, we can just choose 3 or more images and click on them every time in the same order.
Yes. So the order is fixed, and each image is related to some long string of the symbols. So one image is related to 5 or more symbols that are numbers, capital, small letters, and now belong to one phrase. So it means that it is harder to attack this, to make the dictionary attack, and that's why this direction is studied, and so this possibility to better to remember and not to have to remember this difficult alphanumerical symbols, but associate them with the photos and then remember the photos, which is easier to remember and click, and it also requires less effort from the user.
And the last question is, if order is fixed, one images will be always on the screen. Isn't it easy to brute force?
So the images are rearranged after each tapping. So this brute force attack, maybe it can be, so we haven't checked it at this time. So our first focus was usability of this solution. Okay, so this is an interesting point. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't have time for further questions. I encourage all of the people that would like to ask a question to our authors to go to the separate rooms after the whole session. And now I would like to ask a third presentation. So we are in front of Kinga Skorupska, Ewa Makowska, and Anna Jaskulska, and the title is Interdisciplinary Research with Older Adults in the Area of ICT, Selected Ethical Considerations.
Hi, my name is Kinga Skorupska from the XR Lab of the Polish-Japanese Academy of IT, and I'd like to talk a bit about some of the research we did in the area of ICT for older adults and the ethical challenges we've encountered along the way. Together with my co-authors, Ewa Makowska and Anna Jaskulska, we've collaborated on many projects in this area that concern different ways of interacting with novel technologies, for example via voice assistants or brain-computer interfaces, and technology-mediated tasks such as banking, e-commerce, education, and entertainment. Despite the recent progress in the area of ICT for older adults, a lot of research is still tainted by stereotypes about old age and suffers from focusing too much on accessibility. Meanwhile, also some research practices may stifle faster progress in this area, so this is something we'd like to discuss. So with this presentation, we'd like to inspire other researchers in different disciplines to start a dialogue on the issues we raise and some other considerations they've encountered, with a focus on how to find solutions. First of all, researchers in different disciplines may have different research priorities, and these can be the result of what is expected in the journals they want to submit their papers to. For example, while IT researchers may want to test solutions with all older adults, in the spirit of accessibility, psychology researchers may want to screen potential participants, for example, for mild cognitive decline. But such screening procedures may be based on outdated standards and surveys validated a long time ago. However, language changes and everyday habits evolve. So, for example, participants could be expected to know exactly what district they're in or the exact date, but nowadays not knowing this may not be related to cognitive problems, but rather reliance on Google Maps and calendar, so, the everyday use of technology. study documentation could also use an upgrade because consent forms and questionnaires were often designed a long time ago and in a quite inaccessible way, not following best design practices that help understanding, so using diagrams, graphs, color coding information, and so on. They were just recycled the same way they were used many, many years ago. Vocabulary used by different researchers also influences how study participants interact with their tasks. Here one example is the difference between terms such as participants, user, subject, and using one term over the other actually has deep implications on how the researchers present their attitudes towards the study participants, and then in turn how study participants may react to this. This possible detachment can also be felt in the practice to mention as little as possible about study goals. It may have its place in strictly controlled lab experiments, but in the context of participatory workshops or some softer HCI research, it does not. Participants who know too little about the study may engage their own stereotypes about themselves and expect to be tested on stereotypical problems related to old age. So one example could be older adults, when they hear noises in a virtual environment, they think they'll be tested on their hearing. Study design should also take into account keeping participants informed to allow them to feel that they have spent their time in a productive and important way, which is especially important for older adults. Researchers, on the other hand, should also be aware of their own unconscious biases, which may also affect study design. So, for example, from our own practice, we had an experiment where we wanted to test citizen science tasks, and we were reluctant to include a transcription task because we thought it would be too tiring for our participants, but it turned out it was the task with the highest success rate. Overall, we think there is a lot of space for discussion of issues related to ethics. We suggest a few starting points here, and we hope to engage in fruitful discussions with other researchers at MIDI to exchange perspectives, shared experiences, and observations. So, thank you for your attention and have a great conference.
Very much. Are there any questions from the audience? I don't see any for now. So as usually I have a question because it's this session is really close to psychology, or maybe on the other hand psychology is trying to find the way. There is a question. There is a question, so I will keep my for later. Speaking in the broad context of digital interaction of human-computer interaction in general, I wonder whether these considerations could also apply to studies with other age groups. In particular, whether they may also apply to other groups excluded from main technological discourse.
Okay, can you hear me well?
Yes, perfectly.
Great. Yeah, of course, these apply to other age groups as well. Like I mentioned, the evolution of language. Language, evolves, and that affects, for example, how we understand some study like surveys. So in terms of older adults, I've seen some surveys on digital competence where there is like use of jargon. So for example, there was a question, do you own any internet, IoT devices? The consideration here is, do we really check like the understanding of the question itself, so IoT device, or do we check whether these people really own these devices? So that's one thing, but it also applies to younger adults. Let's say when we have some obsolete vocabulary that hasn't been used for years, and they're expected to just know it. So that actually happened to me when I was a study participant. I encountered some like a word that I did not know in Polish. So I asked what it means, and the researcher did not want to tell me. So it does apply to other groups, of course. And when it comes to, you asked about the users excluded from the main technological discourse. Yes, yeah, here is the problem of stereotypes, because we may have some strong stereotypes about like other groups, and that can affect study design, like I mentioned in the video. So we expect that older adults may not want to do a transcription task, but it was one of the best tasks that they performed best at. But the same thing can be true of other groups, of course.
Isn't it a problem of teaching methodology actually? Because majority of the things that you are saying shouldn't actually happen if we have a researcher that is, well, let's say, has this all methodological background that is necessary.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's one of the problems, and I think that's why we actually really need to cooperate in an interdisciplinary way, or maybe even transdisciplinary, so that we can, catch these mistakes early. Because it is maybe it's a bit naive to think that everybody has perfect knowledge of best practices, but like if we cooperate closely with communication experts or designers, so that can alleviate some of these problems. But of course, like I think nowadays we shouldn't expect one researcher to really be able to design a study very, very well, but like rather work as a group. But in the perfect world, yes.
Okay, thank you. I just remember, because I think that there are two separate things that appear here. Sometimes you are really right, because some of the questions may be so obsolete that they totally ruin the method. But sometimes it's not the case, because, well, when you do not understand something, it might be on purpose. So if you do not understand, it means that it doesn't refer to you in any way. On the other hand, I've seen an intelligence questionnaire some time ago in which you had a picture of a man and you had to identify what is missing, and it was a bow tie, which was actually, well, it should be suited to the rest of his suit, which was, like, in our times, it's completely impossible to solve, and this actually makes it totally impossible to solve, and well, even not reliable in the context of what you want to measure. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so we can move on. Thank you again for your presentation. And may I ask the next team? It is number 4, Zbigniew Bogdanowicz, Jarosław Kowalski, and Paweł Kobyliński, with the presentation Case Study, Engaging Electricity Users in Italy, Denmark, Spain, and France in Demand-Side Management Solutions.
Welcome. My name is Zbigniew Bogdanowicz, and today I have a pleasure to present you the work that we've done together with Jarosław Kowalski and Paweł Kobyliński on engaging electricity users in demand-side management solutions. So to make this, to put this in simple words, it's about managing demand for electricity of individual electricity users, so that this demand as a whole would not put such a big pressure on the electricity grid, because currently it creates big imbalances that I would show you in a second. And our goal is to prepare innovations that would mitigate this. But I would like to underline already at the beginning that this presentation is not about showing you results of our work, but more about showing the process of getting these results, because the results can be specific, they relate to the topic that we investigated, but the whole process, we believe that is more universal and can be applied to other problems where innovations are developed, but they need this broad social acceptance to be implemented. Our topic relates to energy transition that is already undergoing in Europe, where we, especially it relates to electricity generation, we shift from the old way of where energy was generated in big power plants and then distributed to households, companies, and so on, to a new, more complex system when energy generated is not only at power plants but also at households by photovoltaic panels and via wind farms, and the whole system involves much more technology, is much more complex, and is much more difficult to manage and to keep in balance. That's why it's more difficult to keep it in balance. I show you here on this picture, because currently, because of this new changes in the system, we have like extra energy that comes from photovoltaic panels that work during the day, and this generated energy is put into the system. But then when we go back home and it's already evening and the sun is not shining, we have increased demand for electricity because we turn on many of our devices, and they put this extra load on the grid. So the more we progress this path, the bigger imbalances we have, because the farther we go, the more energy is generated during the day, and the higher is the peak during the evening, and this creates big stress on the grid, and that has to be somehow managed, and that's why we are trying to find solutions how to smooth this demand for the consumption during the day. And this can be done by technology, this can be done by changing user habits. There are many models of decision making and how people adopt technology, but for purpose of this short presentation, just please recall that to change really any behavior, in our case energy use, we need to affect we need to develop not only technology but also affect user behavior. And technology development of technology can be planned. If we allocate certain budget and time, we can predict that we would have certain outcome. With user behavior, it's much more complex because users are motivated by various factors, and it's not that easy to predict what technology they would like, what they would adopt, and what not. They are the motivations of end users are very often not obvious. They have limitations in resources. They have certain habits that are difficult to change. Some things are just too difficult for people. So there are these cognitive limitations, social norms, knowledge limitations, and so on. We should know this. I just put it here to recall this. So that's why we planned our work in such a way that as the project goes from the start to the end, in various stages, we move from this first exploration phase to more concrete phase where we test specific solutions. And I think, again, this is quite similar to other projects where innovations are developed. So in our case, the first stage was end-user characterization, where we did quantitative and qualitative studies. In quantitative study, we did UNA survey in 4 countries on big representative samples of users. In qualitative study, we interviewed experts that are working at university campuses, and we believe that their perspective is also very important, because already in their work they manage electricity consumption in big buildings, and they have their own more professional view on the topic. At the same time, technical market requirements were made on the technological path. Then we went a bit further. We analyzed the data that we get more deeply, and on basis of this analysis, we prepared methodology for user engagement that consisted of cluster analysis of data from UNA. Based on this, based on segments that we identified, we prepared qualitative consumer profiles, the so-called personas. So these were descriptions of the typical person that is a member of the given consumer segment, and we supplemented this with scientific knowledge on decision making and cognitive processes. And this together constituted a report that we delivered to our partners who were working on technological aspect of this innovation. And they were developing concepts and prototypes of technological innovations. And based on this, we prepared short description of these concepts. And in the next stage, we evaluated these concepts to check how they resonate with end users and what experts think. So we prepared qualitative participatory design workshops, both with end users and with category experts, and we did also in fact, this is what we are doing right now. We are doing quantitative test of the prototype of user interface that is in the shape of, in the form of mobile application that manages various technologies. At this time, our partners develop products, and ahead of us is still the final phase where we would have product tests. We would put final product at demo sites and check how users use this already outcome of our project. So we are here. We have still some work ahead of us, but we believe that already what we have made so far in the last 2 years is worth sharing, and so far it works really well. Here are some examples of data that we gathered. So, for example, in a quantitative study in the first phase, we learned what drives users to save energy, and we found out that it's not only finance, but it's also ecological impact is also important. We learned that in Spain energy is perceived as expensive, but in Denmark not that much. We learned that people, when they are planning to buy a new car, they are planning to choose the one with a modern engine, like hybrid or fully electric, not the traditional combustion engines. And we got lots of such insights. Then in the next phase, we analyzed data more deeply. As I said, we identified consumer segments. We identified 5 of them. We put detailed descriptions of each segment, but this is still quite complex and difficult thing to digest. So for tests on the workshops, we prepared so-called personas. So this is the description of a typical person that of the given segment. This is imaginary person, but we put in these descriptions all these aspects that we learned from quantitative study about people in given consumer segments. So we share, in fact, the same data but in different form. Yeah, the previous slide shows data that is more like in bullet points, showing various characteristics of users. Here is more like description of a lifestyle, habits. Of a person that is more tangible and looks more realistic. And we use this for the workshops that we did with users and experts. For the workshops, we used Jamboard platform, so it's freely available. It's open. Because we are all used to working online, it is quite easy to conduct workshops online, and they work very well. And they also revealed interesting insights about users that we didn't know before. Currently, we are working on evaluation of the mobile application, and this is something that we are doing as a big quantitative study. And as I said, there's still this work ahead of us, so the product test. But we believe that this approach, where we, in parallel from the very beginning of the project, are developing knowledge about how to engage consumers, how to enhance their literacy, is really beneficial, because we have the constant contact with partners who are developing the technological part of the innovation. So to summarize, I would like to just made a few points. What are the benefits that we see of this approach? So first, we can identify the motivations and barriers at the early stage of innovation development, so we can avoid making some mistakes at the very beginning and like choosing the wrong path. That could be very costly. Then we have we provide the data for technology developers on users' habits, needs, and attitudes that support them in developing concepts. We have ongoing evaluation of this technology, so it's not only developing a final product, that is often the case, but we are verifying with users this developed product at various stages of this process, so that we know that we are on the right path. And next, despite that this may look complex, it's quite cost effective, because many things that we did require more effort on our side, but are not that costly. The things that cost are these big quantitative studies, but the rest is mainly our work. So it does require additional work, but it does not require that much of additional cost. And we believe that this process leads to significant reduction of the risk that the product that would be developed would be mismatched versus users' needs and expectations. So that's why we believe that this is something important and worth sharing, that we did this that way. And if you would like to contact us, please do. This is all from me right now. But if any of you would like to learn more about our project, our work, please don't hesitate to contact us. We are here, available, and that's. I would finish here.
Okay, thank you. We have first question. Your co-design workshops seem to be very important part of the process. Could you elaborate a little bit more on this part? How do you ensure that the participants truly contribute to the workshop? Are there some conflicts within this part?
Okay, so yes, co-design workshops were important. They served this purpose that when we did it with experts, also some of the experts were already from the project, so it also shared like knowledge between them. But well, you say that there are some conflicts conflicts. I would need to know a bit more about what type of conflicts you mean. Regarding the workshops with the users, we recruited users from the groups that were targeted by our innovations, and they were working on the ways how to engage people similar to them to participate in these innovations, to adopt them. So by doing so, we learned lots of insights, and it was well important step where we could check the idea at the stage of the concept to know if we are going in the good direction. Regarding conflicting ideas, we didn't want to find the one best idea in the workshop. When we had various paths to go or various ideas, we just indicated this and said that in our group we have this various ideas how this could be approached, and it was also okay. So we didn't see that problem during the workshops. But I would say that I really believe that doing such workshops is very beneficial, and it's quite easy right now because we have these online tools. People are used to working and meeting online, so really recruiting people even from various different parts of the world is quite easy, and this can be done with very low cost. You don't need to travel, you don't need to recruit the meeting room and so on. It's really quick and easy thing.
There is another one. It's actually the follow-up. My concern is how to make sure that the consensus is achieved when a conflict occurs during co-designing. Thanks for explaining.
Yes. So I think we didn't aim for one solution. We are okay with two ideas.
Okay, so I have a question also. How do you sorry if it appeared, but I didn't catch it. How do you handle biases? For example, in many cases, you have such a situation in which your participants would like to be good participants, and they simply, I don't know, propose the solutions that they think you would like, or you would treat as a best solution. So how to,
yes, I think that you never can fully avoid such biases. We try to minimize them by first warming up people by we had this warm up moment where people were somehow encouraged to tell various stories that were not really that I don't know if you know the story game. Story dice game where you have to make stories out of various dices, and it somehow opens people to speak and speak about various topics. Can be quite sometimes not really schematic and tell something that is more brave, more not in line with stereotypes. And we also encourage them that we don't want them to please us. So we had this introduction, and we tried to make the whole workshop in such atmosphere that we don't expect them to be like good citizens, responsible and caring about planet and so on. And we, I think it also was reflected in the results, where most people said that in fact this ecological motivation towards this innovation in electricity is rather on low priority. It is something in the background. So really we didn't feel that something that is more like somehow expected appeared as a high priority in our workshop.
Okay, thank you. There is another question. It will be the last one. The rest in the break rooms. Were the engineers responsible for energy distribution systems surprised by your findings? Has your research changed their design thinking?
Well, I think they were not surprised really, but it modifies the design thinking so that they put more focus on really finding the way how to engage people. It's somehow, I think it gives more proof to something that people think that makes sense. They also have similar feelings that, like, for example, only financial motivation is quite small and too insignificant to motivate people towards action that requires big effort and some compromises. So yeah, it made them more aware that we need to match our technology with consumer expectations, but it was not really that surprising. But they said that it's really interesting. They liked this part of the project, and yeah, always we have like big audience and lots of questions.
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation, and we have the last one in front of us. Let me ask Agata Kopacz, Anna Knapińska, Adam Müller, Grzegorz Banerski, and Zbigniew Bogdanowicz again. The title is Remote Scientific Conferences After the COVID-19 Pandemic, the Need for the Socialization Drivers, Preferences of Virtual Reality Meetings.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anna Knapińska, and I'm going to present a paper to you that I and my colleagues from the National Information Processing Institute have prepared on remote and virtual reality scientific conferences during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm first going to present a broad background of our research. Then I'll say a few words about the analysis we conducted before moving on to a brief summary of our results and conclusions. By the end of this presentation, you'll have a clearer understanding of the differences in attitudes among different groups to remote conferences. So let's begin. There is no doubt that attendance at prominent conferences gives visibility to people involved in science. As American sociologist Robert Merton wrote, visibility or recognition is the base currency for the building of academic reputations. The ongoing pandemic, however, has skewed this picture somewhat, as online and virtual conferences have gained ground. On the one hand, research shows that online events do indeed attract more participants. Those participants produce a lower carbon footprint and can juggle their other responsibilities, both professional and personal. On the other hand, they use monitors in their own homes or workplaces instead of conference halls, and they often encounter technical problems and interruptions. Moreover, without physical presence at conference venues, we found it more difficult to meet new people, and networking is one of the primary objectives of such events. So, what is the alternative? If we can't fully immerse ourselves and socialize with others at traditional in-person conferences, are events organized in immersive virtual reality the solution? That is the question we have attempted to answer. Last year, we conducted computer-assisted web interviews to gather Polish researchers' opinions on remote conferences. We asked whether they had attended such events, how long such events should last, and how much time they wished to dedicate to such events. The sample size was almost 1,600 academics. We considered the distribution of the respondents' characteristics in terms of gender, degree or title, type of institution, and scientific field. To select this random quota sample, we used the Polon system, which is the broadest repository of data on science and higher education in Poland. So what did we do? We divided the respondents using two criteria: their overall willingness to participate in remote scientific conferences after the pandemic, and their openness to conferences held as immersive virtual reality events. In both categories, the respondents indicated whether they were proponents or opponents of each event type. In this way, we obtained 4 subsamples, which we compared in terms of their motivations and preferences. With that in mind, we posed a research question: who exhibits the strongest desire to participate in remote conferences, both ordinary and virtual? It turned out, of course, that the pandemic era has proved beneficial for remote events, and that the academics exhibited willingness to attend online conferences. However, the assessment of the post-pandemic reality is a little different. Skeptics toward remote conferences continuing beyond the pandemic complain most often that in computer-mediated events, communication with other participants was hindered. This was the opinion of Group C, which is keen on virtual reality. The skeptics also complained that online conferences were less prestigious than traditional ones. This was indicated by Group D, which is reluctant toward VR. We can see in the table that Group D is clearly more scientifically oriented than Group C. Members of Groups A and B value personal safety during the pandemic and other factors related to comfort. These are trivial issues for Group C. We also asked which specific events at the conference in immersive virtual reality would you wish to attend. And here, attention among those who were open to using VR technology focused on networking more than the VR skeptics did. The results differed when the respondents expressed their willingness to participate in conferences organized in VR. For greater clarity, in the lower table we have included only the results related to communication-oriented issues themselves. Group A exhibited significantly more interest than other groups in each of the types proposed, from formal activities through informal ones to cultural ones. Contrastingly, Group D, which stated reluctance toward technology, exhibited significantly less interest than the other groups in each of the activity types. In 3 dimensions, however, they do not differ from members of Group B, with whom they share an aversion to VR. As we see, both groups also were interested in the informal aspects of VR conferences to similarly low degrees. Let's move on to the conclusions. The two primary variables we considered, attitudes toward remote conferencing and attitudes toward virtual reality, paint a picture of researchers whose openness to technology in the context of scientific conferences varies. We establish four discrete groups. Among them, the technophiles and the pragmatists were the most experienced with online conferencing. It's unsurprising that the technophiles are relatively the youngest group, and they were keen to participate in almost all events organized in VR. The pragmatists are distinguished by their tendency to identify opportunities to save time and reduce costs. Both of these facts confirm remote conferences' greater inclusiveness. A wider pool of participants, including those who have care duties, can join them. It's worth noting that the pragmatists more often are women. The socializers, who are primarily men, are also an interesting group. They don't like online conferences, but do like VR as a tool and an environment to help them experience closer relations and attend informal meetings. Lastly, the technoskeptics were the group most likely to continue with in-person conferences. They valued the prestige and honor associated with traditional events, and this group comprises the highest proportion of academics aged 56 and over. We believe that our results are of practical importance. Organizers of remote conferences can use these insights to adjust the information they present to different groups of participants. They can also arrange socializing and networking in immersive virtual environments, which can significantly increase participants' satisfaction. That is certainly worth thinking about in the post-pandemic world as well. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. We have a couple of minutes for questions, and then we move to the break rooms. Any questions to this presentation? Okay, for now I don't see any, but I have a, maybe not a question, it's rather a comment. In my opinion, online conference is a kind of a virtual environment itself. So many participants may like this kind of a meeting because they simply have high level of suspension of disbelief and a high co-presence illusion. So I think that if we manage to find a way to promote those, I don't know if it's that easy to promoting the change in the levels of the traits of those traits in our participants, but if it could be possible or to facilitate such a thing, it could be great. There is one question. Thank you. Very interesting to hear about motivation behind attitudes toward different kinds of meetings. And is there more? No. Were there any differences between arts, humanities, and sciences? More technophiles among humanists?
Yeah, I think that we don't have this differentiation on scientific fields in this research, but I agree that it's worth deepening and further examining. So I think, but maybe I don't know. Maybe my colleagues would like to add something, but I think that it's a question we would like to deepen in the future.
This particular research didn't focus on it. However, you can see it on the previous report. And I know that scientists from humanities preferred more presentation. There, for example, posters which were more appreciated by the people from the technology area. That was visible differences.
Okay. Could hybrid approach solve the different attitudes?
Yeah, I think it might be one of the biggest values of this these remote conferences. Yeah, creating different events in VR and other events. Yeah, as we see in the case of this conference, even I don't know, virtual meditation is possible. Yeah, so we could think that it works, but I think yes, and from the perspective of my personal scientific interest, yeah, connected with women in science, I think that this difference between pragmatists and socializers, yeah, is especially interesting, yeah, because we can see that remote conferences can create this inclusiveness, and yeah, and I think that it might be using VR and organizing different events in VR can be a chance for different groups, even if their motivations differ.
I'm a great fan, and I can just encourage you to work further. And I just hope that we will have more of the conferences like the ones that we experienced. Well, what we experience here, and we will have more in VR soon. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Okay, the VR events could be some kind of answer of people who are against the remote conferences. It could be some, you know, some driver that and the only one which can, you know, amaze people who don't want to participate in remote conferences in general. Yes, so we discovered Group C, who in general is against the remote conferences. However, they prefer to participate in virtual reality events. Yes, which can be a part of the remote conferences.
Yeah, and maybe it's more our intuition, yeah. But this skepticism toward VR in the group of pragmatists, yeah, might be a proof that technology, which is connected with being fully immersed, yeah. When for people for whom participation in conferences happens together with child care or elderly care, yeah, it might be an obstacle rather than an advantage, yeah, being fully immersed. So I think that it's worth deepening and further examining. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much again. This was our last presentation. Now we have still a couple of minutes for further and deeper discussion in the breakout rooms. I will just inform you that they will close in 7 minutes. So now I would like to ask all the authors to go and join the breakout rooms to be ready for other participants to join them and discuss further on their presentations. And soon we will have a break and a meditation in front of us, as far as I can see in the program. So thank you again, and see each other in breakout rooms. Thank you.